There is a fight brewing between Texas and the federal government. Texas claims that it is suffering an invasion and has invoked the right to self-defense as outlined in the Constitution. In an open letter addressed to President Biden, Governor Greg Abbott stated that Alexander Hamilton and James Madison both supported the rights of states to police their own borders when faced with a president who is derelict in his duty. When faced with this criticism, Joe Biden offered a rousing speech in his defense.
Let's go lick the world.
We cheer for Muslim athletes like Kareem and Joan Shengai, Shanga Koawa. Ban on transgender Americans.
Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you.
Inspiring stuff from the Commander-in-Chief. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Okay, it's safe to say that most Americans at this point are aware that there is a crisis on the southern border. What some people are either unaware of or possibly in denial about is that that crisis can largely be laid at the feet of Joe Biden. Now, I know what my critics will say, because I hear this quite often, which is that I constantly blame Joe Biden. Everything's his fault, and I always want to blame the Democrats. But this is a case where the executive branch, Joe Biden in particular, have full authority. This is a problem that you cannot blame on anything else other than Joe Biden's incompetence and his administration's policies. We're going to go through a couple reasons why that is right off the bat. So the first day that Joe Biden was sworn in as president, he signed a whole bunch of executive orders. Most people have forgotten, but he has wielded the pen of the executive more than any president ever. He has overreached his authority more than any president in history of the presidency. And every president does a little bit more. Every president wants to seize more executive power. Joe Biden has taken it to the next level. Day one, what he did with his pen, the first thing was he suspended the Remain in Mexico policy. He vowed to build no more, he said, not one more foot of border wall is going to be built. And he began encouraging more catch and release. Now, when Donald Trump was president, we heard a lot about kids in cages. We've gone through this before in the past about the kids in the cages and how this is all basically a bunch of nonsense, because it used to be what happened under Barack Obama, under his administration, when we would catch people at the border. There used to be a time when we would actually hold people at the border and to figure out who they were. So the way it used to work is you would catch people. If they had minors with them, you would keep the families together. So you would take the families and you would put them in detention so that you kept the families together. The ACLU sued the federal government and said that we can't detain kids in basically what amounts to holding or jail. So they sued, and then the kids were separated from the parents post this lawsuit and placed in another place, which became the whole problem with kids in cages, where they said Donald Trump was being mean, when in reality it was a federal lawsuit that prevented families from being kept together, and the kids had to be separated. So anyway, when Joe Biden came into office, he didn't want kids in cages. Nobody wants kids in cages, but he said, we're not going to have any kids in cages. Well, what does that mean? Well, you're not allowed to hold families together. So if there's a minor, you're not allowed to hold them in detention. So either the kids need to be separated or you have to release them. So what did Joe Biden do? He begins or re-implements the policy of catch and release. So if a family comes across the border and you catch them, you can no longer detain them unless you want to separate the children from the family. So instead, what happens? The family gets a bus voucher to whatever city they want, and they're released into the interior. This happens within 72 hours. More than that, it happens much quicker most of the time. So this catch and release policy has been in full effect. People, before Joe Biden even took office, understood that his administration was going to be soft on immigration. There were already trains of people who were coming to the border when asked, this is on camera, on film, when MSNBC or NBC, one of the major news channels, they went down there and they're asking people, why are you coming to the border? They would tell the people, well, because Donald Trump is out of office and Joe Biden's coming in office and Joe Biden will just let you into the country. People said this to the national news. It's on camera. It's not a conspiracy theory. People understood that the Joe Biden administration was going to be soft on the border. So far, in the 3 years of his presidency, he has been the worst president of my lifetime on the border. He just has. And we have a little chart I'm going to show. You know, we love our charts here on the Chrestman Conversation. I want everyone to take a look at this. So for those of you who can't see, this is a chart of Obama and Trump and Biden. And it's just immigration in the last the last 10, 12 years. So Barack Obama, his first term, you have this chart that kind of goes up, not at quite a 45-degree angle, maybe a 35-degree angle. And over the course of, by the way, we should show where this chart's from. So it's from the Center for Immigration Studies. And it says foreign-born population growth, basically. And the headline, the whole headline for people just listening, there is a lot of variation from month to month, but the foreign-born population grew much more slowly during Trump's presidency than during Obama or Biden's. So they have, this is the foreign-born population, okay? So this includes illegal immigration and legal immigration. This includes the whole deal. Under the last 3 years of Obama's first term, the foreign-born population in the United States increased by 2.3 million. In his second term, it went up 3.6 million. In Donald Trump's first 4 years, it went up 1.5 million. And in the first 13 months of Joe Biden's presidency, it went up 1.7 million. So that means, just doing quick math, we have 5.9, almost 6 million, an increase in 6 million foreign-born people under Obama. Donald Trump, we have 1.5 million. And in the first 13 months of Joe Biden, it was 1.7 million, outpacing Donald Trump in the first 13 months. So that number for Joe Biden has crept up. It is now at about 8 million. That's, by the way, that's not foreign-born population. That actually does not include legal immigrants. What that includes is, that is what they're saying, illegal immigration is up 8 million people under Joe Biden. It is outrageous that this is an acceptable number. There have been millions of people. 8 million people, by the way, I think off the top of my head, 8 million people is larger than I think it's the top, all except for 30 cities in the United States. It has more than that, probably. 8 million people is a gigantic number. Oh, states. I'm sorry, not city, states. It's more than 30 states of people. It is a crazy number that it's hard to comprehend. And this is all because of policies that incentivize. When you talk about immigration, you're talking about a push-pull situation. Okay? Donald Trump was hard on immigration. People didn't come because they knew that if they got caught, they weren't getting into the country. And they worried about the consequences if they were caught. Joe Biden has incentivized people to come to the United States. He is pulling people into the United States with his lax border policies and basically his administration's capitulation to the demands of his far left. He is encouraging immigration from all over the world. I have no issues with immigration. There are some people who are much more nativist, would be the right word, than I am. I'm not. I think immigration's a good thing for the country on a whole. However, the amount is very important, and we have entirely too much. And illegal immigration should be stopped entirely. This is ridiculous. What we don't need in the country is low-skilled work. People say we do, but it's not true. We have an abundance of low-skilled workers. We do not need more low-skilled workers. They talk about the migrants, the farm hands who come and pick vegetables in California. It is not true that Americans won't do the work. It's actually not true. They've done studies about this where they said, oh, well, we can't fill the jobs with Americans. The reason why you can't fill those jobs in California is because there is an abundance of illegal immigrants who will pick vegetables for less than what Americans would settle for. It's not because Americans won't do the work. It's because you're artificially lowering wages with increased illegal immigrants who come into the country. So there are a lot of problems with this, and Joe Biden has been pulling low-skilled migrants in here because they have realized that you can game the system because Joe Biden is not policing the border. They have implemented catch and release. All you have to do, I'll give you the plan. If you want to come into the country illegally, here's what you have to do. You go into the country. You say, I fear for my life. They say, okay, here's your court date. Have fun. Enjoy the interior of the United States. That is all that happens at the border. They catch people. They say, well, I'm here to seek asylum. Then we have to give them a court date, at which point they are released into the interior of the United States. They just disappear into the population. That is exactly how it works. That is exactly why we've had 8 million people who have come across the border, because it is that simple. Joe Biden they're not policing the border. He's turned the Border Patrol, he's turned U.S. Customs into an Uber for illegal immigrants. All they do now is catch people coming across the Rio Grande or walking through the desert, and then they take them, give them some water, give them a court date, release them into the interior. They do not deport people. They are not in the business of telling people they can't come in. That's not their job anymore. They are just an Uber for illegal immigration. And Joe Biden has done that. That is not anyone else's policy. The Remain in Mexico policy was a great thing. Oh, Title 42. Title 42 was another one that Joe Biden initially fought. Title 42 stated that the Donald Trump administration, because of COVID, had the ability to deport anyone who attempted to cross the border due to there being a pandemic. So Title 42, when it expired, because it was only a temporary bill, Joe Biden, not that they exercised it, but then they lost the power to just deport people at will. They have the power, but they didn't have the excuse. The Remain in Mexico policy that Donald Trump negotiated with Mexico was a great policy. What it said was, well, you're from Guatemala. You came through Mexico. Why do you get to pass all of the countries in Central America and Mexico to come to the United States? Why can't you seek refuge closer? So we'll hear your asylum claim, but you have to remain in Mexico. That's the name of the policy. And it was a great policy that prevented people who were seeking asylum from just walking thousands of miles through multiple countries to come to the United States. They said, no, you have to stay somewhere else. If you're really a refugee, if you really fear for your life, which is what this should mean, it's not economic migration. We're talking about people who fear for their life. Why are you able to bypass multiple countries to come to the United States? You don't just get to come to the United States because you say that people are mean where you live. If you're afraid, then go somewhere else. But that doesn't necessarily mean the United States. So all of this stuff coincided with Joe Biden refusing to police the border and basically just incentivizing illegal immigrants to migrate to the United States. So what happened in response? Why are we talking? We've now spent however long talking about this, but we haven't mentioned Texas. So what did Texas do in response to this? Well, Texas started a program, which at the time I thought was amazing. I still do. I think it's great. Texas began to send illegal immigrants on buses to New York City and Chicago. A couple other cities, but New York City and Chicago were the big ones. He has now bused 95,000 illegal immigrants, 95,000 to New York and Chicago, 2 of the 3 largest cities in the United States, and they are overwhelmed. They do not know how to handle it. And the entire reason is you're sending them to Democratic states, big Democratic cities, sanctuary cities, who say, we welcome all illegal immigrants. And Texas is saying, well, you don't have to deal with it. Do you understand what it's like for a state to have to deal with this? And these cities have been complaining and crying and whinging nonstop since it began about how hard it is for them. When there's 95,000 people between the 2 cities who have been bused there, we're out of the 8 million people who have crossed into Texas, Arizona, California. It's not just Texas, but millions of people who have crossed into Texas. They sent 95,000 to New York City and Chicago, and the cities have a conniption. So that was the first thing that Texas did. Then Texas said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to put buoys up in the Rio Grande, with the idea being that the buoys will prevent people from being able to cross, or at least slow them down so that Border Patrol can record them on their encounter list. They can at least go there and assess them. So what happened? Texas puts buoys up. The federal government sues and forces Texas to remove the buoys. So then Texas upped it. They put razor wire on the border. Joe Biden, Texas versus Biden, became a case where basically the Supreme Court was now decided, because the state and the federal government, that's where the Supreme Court comes in. They adjudicate all of those cases. The Biden administration won. Texas, or the Supreme Court sided with the Biden administration over Texas and said that that the Border Patrol has the legal authority to remove the razor wire that Texas set up. By the way, Texas set up razor wire on, what is it, a 2-mile stretch of the border. I think it was less than 2 miles, a mile stretch maybe even, in Eagle Pass. It's a highly trafficked area where they put up razor wire. So the Supreme Court sides with the Biden administration, says that the Border Patrol agents have the authority to go in there and remove the razor wire. Texas also made it a state crime to arrest illegal immigrants, which the Biden administration sued and tried to get that law overturned. So when the Supreme Court ruled that the Biden administration has the ability to remove the razor wire, Greg Abbott said, well, okay, but I'm going to continue to put razor wire up. And now there is this big standoff, because the Supreme Court didn't actually say that Texas doesn't have the right to put razor wire up. All they said was that the border agents have the authority to remove it. Greg Abbott, again, the governor of Texas, he wrote this letter. It's fantastic, I will say. It is a great letter. I want to just read a part of it here real quick. This was his response to losing the lawsuit. And this is what the letter reads. This is from Greg Abbott. Quote, "The federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states. The executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now. President Biden has refused to enforce those laws and has even violated them. The result is that he has smashed records for illegal immigration. Despite having been put on notice in a series of letters, one of which I delivered to him by hand, President Biden has ignored Texas's demands that he perform his constitutional duties." 3 bullet points follow. 3. President Biden has violated his oath to faithfully execute immigration laws enacted by Congress. Instead of prosecuting immigrants for the federal crime of illegal entry, President Biden has sent his lawyers into federal courts to sue Texas for taking action to secure the border. President Biden has instructed his agencies to ignore federal statutes that mandate the detention of illegal immigrants. The effect is to illegally allow their en masse parole into the United States. By wasting taxpayer dollars to tear open Texas's border security infrastructure, President Biden has enticed illegal immigrants away from the 28 legal entry points along the state's southern borders, bridges where nobody drowns, and into the dangerous waters of the Rio Grande. Here's where he talks about James Madison and Alexander Hamilton. James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and the other visionaries who wrote the U.S. Constitution foresaw that states should not be left to the mercies of a lawless president who does nothing to stop external threats, like cartels smuggling millions of illegal immigrants across the border. That is why the framers included both Article 4, Section 4, which promises the federal government shall protect each state against invasion, and Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, which acknowledges the state's sovereign interest in protecting their borders, Arizona v. United States. So, Greg Abbott cites the Constitution and is making a great point that the executive branch has the constitutional duty to enforce laws enacted by Congress. You do not get to choose what laws you do and do not enforce. You don't. You don't get to choose that. District attorneys don't get to choose that. Prosecuting attorneys don't get to choose that. The law is the law. You enforce the law. And President Biden has failed to do that. So, Texas, even though they lost the Supreme Court ruling, said, we're going to continue to enforce the border, which is what this letter is about. And this is where the standoff lies. because the federal government is saying we have the sole authority to enforce the border. And Greg Abbott is saying, no, you do not. The Constitution demands you enforce the border, but the compact with the states says that if you don't, we have the right to do it. There is a constitutional standoff here. And 25 governors have joined in support of Texas to say that Texas has the right to police its borders. It is a lively debate. It's a constitutional debate, but it makes me worried about what that holds for the future. The federal government has failed in its duty to enforce the border. That is clear. 8 million people crossing illegally into the United States is a failure. It is a failure of the Biden administration to do its basic duty. One of the basic duties of which is to protect against invasion. 8 million people would have sounded like an invasion to people in 1776 because there was, in 1776, I think there was probably less than 8 million people in the country. I'm not 100% sure that's true, but I would be surprised if I was wrong. And so if it's the case that the framers of the Constitution, the people who wrote the thing that binded the states to the federal government, if they would have agreed with the language of invasion, well, then the Constitution is clear. If the federal government doesn't protect you against invasion, states have the right to do it. It seems as though Texas has the right to police its border based on the Constitution. That's my reading of it, at least. I wonder if we can find out with a quick Google search. Population of United States, 1776. I'm curious if we... Oh, this doesn't go all the way back. So... Oh, here we go. Yeah, it does. Oh, yeah, look at that. Okay, so 1780. There were 2.7 million people in the United States. So, yes, I think it would have sounded like an invasion if 8 million people came into the United States when there was a population of 2.7 million people. Anyway, besides that, what's going to happen in the future? This is the kind of stuff that people don't talk about enough. They don't think about enough. This is a constitutional crisis. The Supreme Court has ruled that the Biden administration has the ability to enforce the border. There is a standoff right now between the federal government and one of the states. This is dangerous stuff because Joe Biden is so ideologically opposed to a secure border that he's willing to fight the state of Texas to allow unchecked entry into the United States. By the way, 180 people, I believe, 180 people from the terrorist watch list have been caught at the southern border. How many people haven't been caught? Because what we have now is encounter numbers. We have 8 million people. Not all of those are encounters. Some of those are called known gotaways. And what that means is they log somebody either on a drone or on a camera or anything, but the border agent never had contact with them. So we have a bunch of known gotaways, and then we have the unknown gotaways. So we've caught 170 or 180 people on the terrorist watch list. How many people from the terrorist watch list haven't we caught? Oh, we seized 100 kilos of fentanyl at the border. How much fentanyl have we not seized at the border? Because right now, Joe Biden is the best friend to the cartel ever. All he's done is propped up a terrorist organization in South America, or in Central and South America. The cartels are making billions of dollars because Joe Biden is president, funneling people across the border and smuggling drugs into the country. We had 100,000 Americans die of fentanyl. Nobody argues where the fentanyl is coming from. The fentanyl is produced in China. It is shipped into Central and South America, and then it is walked across the border by the cartel. That is where the fentanyl comes from. It's not being produced in the United States. It's not being shipped in containers from China. That doesn't happen en masse. What it is walking across the border. So every person you know who's dying of a drug overdose, that's because the border is not secure. More than anything else, that's where the fentanyl is coming from. And fentanyl is so much worse than other drugs. This isn't like when heroin was being smuggled in from Vietnam. Heroin is bad. People die from heroin. It's not the same. The overdose deaths in the last 30 years have gone from somewhere around 10 to 15,000 to over 100,000. It's not because more people are doing drugs. It's because the drugs are deadlier and the drugs are coming across the southern border that Joe Biden refuses to police. It's not just me who feels this way. CBS did a poll recently that showed 70% of Americans disapprove of Joe Biden's border policies. This Biden immigration bill that the administration is talking about, they don't need it. It's a bad bill, and any Republican who votes to pass it should be kicked out of Congress by their Republican voters because it's a bad immigration bill. Joe Biden is saying, I need more power. Actually, what he's saying is, but what he means is, I need more power. If the executive branch doesn't need more power to enforce the border, they have sole authority. They can do whatever they want on the border. You might think a border wall is stupid. It's not. It actually works because people, they say, oh, they just climb it. You know who's not climbing it? Most people. The people who climb it, all it does is slow people down. That's the point of the border wall. It's not that people aren't going to get over it. People are going to get over it. They'll cut through it. They'll bring up 30-foot ladders and they'll find ways over it. I understand that people can get over a wall if they're determined. The reason why walls work is not just because they keep people out. It's because they slow people down. When you have these raids on castles in the Middle Ages, it's not that people didn't bring ladders to climb them. It's that they are slowed down by the wall. When they come up the ladder is when you catch them. And in the case of battles in the Middle East, when you kill them at the border, it's when you apprehend them and arrest them. That the walls work. Joe Biden doesn't like a wall. Wall's bad. Okay, whatever. It doesn't need to be a physical wall, by the way. It could be anything. Any type of barrier would be sufficient. He doesn't need more power to do all these things. He doesn't need more power to direct deportations at the border. You can expel people at the border. He doesn't need more power to negotiate a new Remain in Mexico deal. He doesn't need more power to do it. Donald Trump did it. He just refuses to do it. What does the future hold? I don't know. It's going to be hard to tell. I am worried about this because this is a giant constitutional crisis. You have states, 25 states, half of the states in the country are signed on to a bill that supports Texas to go against the federal government. What does that mean? Are we looking at a new civil war? I don't think so. I think that'd be ridiculous. But I don't know. It's a possibility. I wouldn't say it's likely. I wouldn't say it's the number one possibility, but it's likely. And these are the kind of things that do it. When Texas is saying the federal government is not upholding its end of the bargain, why do we need the federal government? Well, that's a great question I don't know the answer to. Joe Biden's administration is terrible. It has done a terrible job in all aspects of governance. I don't know an area where I say Joe Biden has done a good job. And that's not just because I'm some sort of partisan hack. It's just because I can't think of one where I say, well, Joe Biden's doing better than Donald Trump on X issues. On being asleep, maybe. On not being quite so annoying on Twitter, maybe. Although some of his stuff really annoys me on Twitter. I don't know what people are looking at and saying, I'd like to vote for this guy. He's doing a great job. I don't understand it. This border thing is a gigantic problem. And people don't understand it because they don't think. Because most people are not xenophobic. Most people are not racist. But the Biden administration pretends that the only reason to be against illegal immigration is for one of those two reasons. Well, the only reason you don't like illegal immigration is because of xenophobia. What? No. That's a terrible argument. It's an ad hominem attack. It has no substance. But people believe it. People believe it for a long time. Oh, the only reason that you're against it is because it's Mexicans coming across the border and you don't like brown people. That's absurd. I worry a lot about different things. One of the things I don't care about is what color some guy's skin is. It's not something I care about. Yet I care about illegal immigration because it is an economic depressant. It is hard on the taxpayers in schools. People say, oh, well, illegal immigrants don't receive benefits from the United States government. This is not true whatsoever. They use the social services. They actually get checks if they have children in the United States who are American citizens. You can give the parents get checks from the government. And there is an effect on crime that people say, well, illegal immigrants actually hold a lower percentage of crime convictions than regular people. I say, but any is too much. Do you understand that? Any is too much. We can pull up case after case after case of murders, rapes, robberies committed by criminals who are sneaking over the border. The guy and his wife who want to get out of a third world country and come into the United States because the guy wants to work and he wants to support his family. He wants to have a better life for his people. Like, I don't have any issues with people like that. Like, that's fine. That's most people. Most people just want to come here and work. They want to send home money to their family to support people. I get that. That is an understandable goal. But let's not pretend that everyone who comes across the border is great. It's not true. There are people who are bringing drugs across. There are people who are committing crimes in the United States. Those people also exist, and we shouldn't want those people to be here. There's a guy. This happened just the other day. There were 2 police officers attacked in New York City by a group of people who were illegal immigrants in the United States, one of which has been arrested 3 times in the last year, and he was just released with no bail because New York City is an idiotic place, and they released this guy after assaulting a police officer on camera with no bail. And while he's coming out, you know what he does? He gives double fingers to the media. That guy, been arrested 3 times. Once for assaulting a police officer. He came in illegally. We shouldn't have let him in the first place. Why are we letting in people who don't care to make America better, who don't want to come here to just work, who want to come here to take advantage of our niceness? So this is what Joe Biden doesn't understand. They want to act like everyone in the world believes exactly what they believe. Everyone in the world is a good actor. Everyone in the world wants peace and harmony and love and just to work hard and prosper. That's a lot of people, but it's not everybody. It might not even be most people in the world. There are a giant groups of people that just want to take advantage of the West's soft underbelly. And Joe Biden doesn't understand that. It's why the fentanyl pours across. It's why the cartel and the gangs pour across. It's why women who come across the United States southern border are sexually assaulted at a rate that's upwards of 80%. Do you think that's good? The people who drowned in the Rio Grande, the cartel will take babies and throw children into the river, knowing that the Border Patrol will then have to conduct life-saving operations to get people out of the river. And while they are trying to save the lives of people that the cartel just throw in a river, the cartel downstream will sneak across the border with the drugs. That is how it works. The Border Patrol knows that's how it works, but they don't have the agents to stop it, because when the kids go in the water, the border agents have to go in the water. They have to risk their lives to stop people from drowning. I can't remember if it was 2 or 1 now off the top of my head. I feel bad about that. But we had a border agent drown this year because the cartel threw a baby in the river, and he tried to swim in and get the baby, and he wound up drowning. Because the cartel knows that the border agents are going to risk their lives. They will take advantage of the niceness of the border agents who want to save the lives of people that the cartel will just throw in a river to die while they sneak drugs across farther downstream. Or they get paid to sneak across terrorists. This is an actual thing that's happening. The cartel, a terrorist organization, is being paid by other terrorists to sneak across terrorists into the United States. 180 apprehensions. How many haven't we gotten? So anyway, I'm going on a rant here. This gets me all fired up. It just doesn't make any sense that people would look at these policies and think that they're helping anyone. Do you think it's good for women to be sexually assaulted? Do you think it's good for kids to be trafficked? That's what's happening at the southern border because the cartel can. Because they can get these people across the border, and once they're here, they can traffic these children. They can turn the women into sex slaves, which happens. They can traffic these people across the border. On the way up here, they're going to be sexually assaulted. Do we think that's good? Do we think that's nice? That's good for women? That's good for Hispanic women who want to come to America, that they have to face sexual assault to get here? Because the cartel can. They can do it. And Joe Biden's incentivizing this. He's paying them billions of dollars to do these horrible, terrible things. Anyway, we're going to leave it there for the day. this is a complicated topic. I feel like I'm not touching everything. If people have things that they would like me to address, specific things about this topic or any topic, I always appreciate good questions. This one, I know my friend Brad asked me a question a while back about doing something on the southern border. So this is kind of based on a question somebody asked me. So anytime somebody asks me a question on Facebook or whatever, I try and answer it. And I always like that. So if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, as always, like, share, do all that good stuff. Help me get it out there a little bit more. It's been nice. Our viewers continue to go up, which I've always am happy about. It's weird because the platforms always shift. It used to be, it started off YouTube, people watched. Then it was on Facebook. Then when Facebook started to throttle traffic, it went over to Spotify. Spotify has been the big one, which I'm really happy about. So Spotify continues to grow as the podcasting. Oh, and then Apple. Apple was okay for a little while, the Apple podcast. But then everyone seems to now listen to podcasts on Spotify. So Spotify has been our big thing, which I appreciate. Everyone who listens on there. Anyway, we're going to leave it there for the day. I'm Tyler Chrestman. I will catch you guys on the next episode.